No matter what you do, don't ever, and I mean ever, lock me in a room with Brad Dourif, because it can get pretty damn intense. Let's review The Exorcist 3. The Exorcist 3 stars George C. Scott, Brad Dourif, and is directed by William Peter Blatty. What is up, guys? It's new review time. I recently put out my top 10 favorite possession horror movies, and two movies that I did not include in there because I have not seen them yet that I constantly saw in the comments were these two movies right here, The Exorcist 3 and Possession. Haven't watched Possession yet, just watched Exorcist 3. As a matter of fact, I did a poll on Killer Flicks and my patron page, and the patron page was really close, but Exorcist 3 won by a landslide, especially when you put it on Killer Flicks. And maybe I was a little bit skittish about this movie, I will say. And just because The Exorcist, the first one, which I have not reviewed yet, let me put these down, is an intimidating movie to discuss because of how high it is held. It is considered one of the greatest horror films of all time, and it really is one of the greatest horror films of all time. And it might be one of the scariest. It is a brilliant film. I think it's what every horror director strives to do but fails to achieve, because it's almost impossible to touch The Exorcist. So it's a movie that I'm definitely planning on reviewing down the line, but I just haven't been in the headspace to do it yet. And so Exorcist 2, god awful. I mean, probably the best example of the worst sequel ever made, especially compared to the first movie. And if you look back there, when I met Linda Blair at Spooky Empire a few years ago, I had her sign my Exorcist 2 VHS. I'll probably never watch that VHS, but it is one of my most prized possessions just because Linda Blair signed it. So after seeing the second movie, I had pretty much just put off the third movie. I remember when this movie came out back in the day, back in 1990, I believe, seeing commercials for it. You know, it was a big event. We're finally going to get the true sequel to The Exorcist.
On August 17th, the creator of the original Exorcist brings you fear beyond your darkest nightmares. William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist 3, rated R. Starts Friday, August 17th at theaters everywhere.
The trailer actually looked, or TV spot, I think that's what I saw, looked pretty chilling, actually. But for some reason, I just avoided it. I had no desire to see it. How do you top the first movie? Second movie was complete trash.
Oh, few boos from the gallery, I see.
But it took a top 10 to finally get me to come back around and watch this movie, and I will say I am glad that I did. This is a movie that is 10 times better than the second movie, which that's not saying really anything at all. I was wondering, after I bought the Blu-ray, how am I going to review this? There is a director's cut and there is a theatrical cut, and we're going to discuss a little bit of that too in this review. And I got to give a quick shout out. Brad Zabluski, he said, why don't you do a theatrical review and then come back and do a revisited review and discuss the director's cut. I love that idea, so that's what I'm going to do. And so much so that I have not watched the director's cut yet. I'm saving that for a fresh watch when I eventually do come back and do the revisited review. I do know that the ending is almost completely different than the ending in this movie, but I don't know what that ending is. But I'm glad I watched the theatrical version. I mean, possession movies, especially when they're done at the A level, they're heavy movies. You know, they're really serious. There's very little comedy whatsoever. They're not what you would call fun horror, comedic horror movies at all. You know, you have to be in the right mindset to sit down and even watch these movies. But the flip side of that is you can expect usually some really good performances. So, quick plot synopsis. Beginning of this movie, you see like this big gust of wind just come through this church. And you see this like 12-year-old child. It's kind of hard to decipher exactly what's going on, but within like the first 10 minutes, you figure out that this child was actually killed in a heinous way by who is called the Gemini Killer. That is the main killer throughout this movie. And so the great George C. Scott, he plays Kinderman. Kinderman was the detective in the first movie. It just wasn't played by George C. Scott. That actor actually died a couple years later. And so who better to fill his shoes than George C. Scott? And boy, does he do a really great acting job in this movie. Very intense.
It is not in the file. It is not.
And so he's on the case. He's trying to figure out why these killings are happening. He goes to this like mental ward, and there is this one character there they call Patient X, and he claims to be the Gemini Killer. Everybody says the Gemini Killer was actually killed like 15 years ago. And so this guy, played in the theatrical cut by two different people, Brad Dourif and Jason Miller, returning from the original Exorcist movie. And so then there's a section of the movie where you have Kinderman having these one-on-one sessions with the Gemini Killer. This is the section that kind of reminded me of like those sessions with Clarice and Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, even though this movie predates that movie by a year. But these are probably the best scenes of the movie, actually.
You see, they were off my beaten track. I kill at random. That's the thrill of it. No motive. That's the fun. The black boy and the priests were different.
Now, just to go into the backstory of this film, I always am interested in movies that have troubled productions, especially when you end up with a completely different version of the movie. And The Exorcist is a strange franchise because you have this movie which has two different versions, and then you have like later, a few years later, you had The Exorcist the Beginning and Exorcist Dominion, which are based off of the same story, I believe. So it's a really strange franchise. They could never get a hit off of this franchise after the first movie for some reason. Now, if I take you back to the first movie, William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin, they actually came up with the idea for this book called Legion, this story called Legion. And I'll even say that it might not have been an Exorcist feature. It might have been just a completely different movie altogether. Eventually, Friedkin dropped out of the project, and so William Peter Blatty wanted to direct the thing himself. And he wanted it to be just Legion. And he was pretty much forced into calling this Exorcist 3. But the funny thing is, and I don't know if this is because he is just an author directing the movie. I think that's exactly what it was. You know, this is an author that doesn't have that much experience directing. I think he directed another movie before this. But when you're that close to the source material, you become very protective of the source material, and you're not as, I guess, free thinking about the project. And that's what happened with this. And some might say that Blatty was kind of difficult on set, just because he wasn't open to different ideas. He had his vision. He wanted this movie to be this exact thing, boom, 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 and then his ending. But unfortunately, his ending wasn't an Exorcist type of ending. It didn't have an exorcism at the end of the movie. So the studio jumped in. We've all heard these stories so many times before, but studio jumps in and they force him to put in an exorcism at the end of the movie, so it feels like it ties with the first movie much better.
Goodbye, Lieutenant. Damien!
And they also force him to bring in Jason Miller to return as not really Father Karras, because he's not playing that part, but when Father Karras died at the end, I guess the entity used his body as a vessel. But all these scenes with Brad Dourif were filmed before all these reshoots, so they didn't want to lose those scenes, so they ended up just pretty much making him, change bodies, from Jason Miller to Brad Dourif.
You must get them to do that, Lieutenant. It's important.
The Gemini is dead.
No, I am not! I'm alive!
Kind of like what happened to Heath Ledger after he died, and they had to fix that movie. Now, thankfully, after all that mess, this is a really good movie, and I've just seen the theatrical version. But it definitely has a lot of those creepy elements that you would expect from a good Exorcist movie. And I will say, I kind of like how William Peter Blatty approached this movie from a directorial standpoint. He pretty much chose a fixed camera approach throughout. I mean, you're going to see camera movements here and there, of course. The guy definitely knew what he was doing, but there was a lot of scenes, especially this one scene where this nurse gets killed, and the camera is just right there. And you pretty much just see her moving through the frame, and you're just searching around the frame, finding out what's going to go on. It's definitely an exercise in tension. Also, the Gemini Killer himself I found pretty interesting, and he's also kind of a question mark. Like, I definitely had questions or theories that you could come up with after watching this movie about the Gemini Killer. I know he was originally based on the Zodiac Killer, and the entity that is in the first movie does exist within the Gemini Killer. He wanted to take revenge for being defeated in the first movie. So he takes Father Karras's body and kind of moves from body to body in this movie, because the Gemini Killer is incarcerated throughout this whole movie. But this breadcrumb of clues leads Kinderman to the actual killer. Like I said, he's incarcerated the whole movie. But he thinks this entity is actually just moving from body to body, sometimes controlling multiple bodies at once. They do offer some new theories, some new, I guess, rules that weren't in the first movie, which is a good thing in sequels. I don't mind that at all when you expand on the lore a little bit. But really, guys, the big thing you need to know about this movie is the performances, especially by Brad Dourif and George C. Scott. I think George C. Scott ratchets it up a little bit too much in some of the scenes. He definitely yells a lot.
You son of a bitch! I believe!
Like I said, he's an intense guy. But Brad Dourif, wow, this is an amazing performance, and it's so good that it shocks me that the guy wasn't nominated for any awards at the time.
Is the torment of your friend, Father Karras, as he watches while I rip and cut and mutilate the innocent.
And I was so into his performance in the movie that I actually wanted to watch like interviews with Brad Dourif concerning this film. And he's such a down-to-earth and humble guy. You know, you'd think somebody that's that strong of an actor would be, you know, flexing. But he wasn't doing that at all in this interview that I saw with him. He was basically saying, hey, sometimes you don't want to do what the director wants, even though the director thinks that's the best part for the role. He stated that he tried a lot of different approaches to this character, sometimes just playing him straight, and he would deliver all his lines perfectly, but then in the playback, it came off as boring. So that's why when you watch his performance, you can tell that he's being very experimental and he's trying a lot of different things. And in the end, we get probably the greatest aspect of this movie. And it's memorable. It's very memorable.
I like Titus Andronicus the best. It's sweet. Incidentally, did you know that you are talking to an artist?
And if you look at the movie, Brad Dourif, he looks pretty young in this movie too. And also when the entire movie, you're sitting directly across from the great George C. Scott. That can be pretty damn intimidating. But he outshines George C., if you ask me. Also, jumping back on the creepy stuff, the nature in which the killer tortures his victims in this movie is insanely creepy. Utilizing this drug that basically paralyzes them but keeps them alert so they can actually feel the pain but they can't react to it. So, you know, that's pretty much psychological torture right there. And also, he decapitates the victims. And there's this one section in the movie where he is speaking through the Gemini Killer. You know, this is Brad Dourif, and he's talking about how after the human head is decapitated, it can still function for 20 seconds later. So after he would cut their heads off, he would turn it around so they could see their own body. That's some pretty messed up shit right there. Also, you are going to see some elements from the first Exorcist that I guess marry this movie up to it. Like you see the old lady crawling on the ceiling above Kinderman. You know, it's just stuff like that that kind of reminds you of the first movie. I mean, it opens up with the iconic stairs, you know, and showing Karras, you know, jumping out the window and falling to his death. Now, after watching this theatrical cut, I am curious to check out the director's cut. I do like that they ended the movie the way they did with the exorcism, because at the end of the day, it's a scary scene. It's very creepy. You have this father that comes in to try to exorcise the Gemini Killer, and he pretty much gets filleted. It's a really creepy scene, actually. And then you have these like demons coming up from the floor. Visually, it's a really interesting scene to look at. And if you look behind the scenes, they literally had like 3 weeks to put all that together. And it's really a special effects extravaganza. It was like every second counts, because this is stuff that they needed like 3 months to do, and they had 3 weeks to do. And the end result, I think, is very effective. So I have a feeling after I watch the director's cut, I might prefer the theatrical cut, but I'll reserve judgment until I actually see it. I do hear you get more Brad Dourif in the director's cut though, so very curious. So anyway, guys, I'm going to give this movie a purchase worthy, just because it's hard to compare it to the first movie. The first movie is still a very much better movie, but this one is still very effective. So I'm definitely giving a high purchase worthy. And I'm looking forward to the director's cut. Anyway, let me know in the comments your thoughts on Exorcist 3. Looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.